take it from here. Good afternoon, welcome everybody to your Scottish Parliament. My name is Emma Harper. I'm one of the MSPs from the South Scotland region. I'm a member of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee. I'm also a member of the Rural Affairs Committee as well. And I want to welcome you all to the Festival of Politics 2025, where you can expect an exciting range of provoking and inspiring and informing debates taking place over the 3 days. So we're on the final day, and I'm sure there's been a lot of exciting events has happened before today. So I am looking forward to this discussion today and hearing about everyone's thoughts and views. It's important that everyone is given an opportunity to contribute, even where there may be differences of opinion, and we treat each other respectfully at all times. I think often it's good to have a debate and raise the different ideas and even if they might not be all agreed on. So we're delighted you can join us today to participate in Junk versus Jabs and our relationship with food in partnership with the University of Aberdeen. And later I will be inviting you all to get involved with questions and comments. So if you're keen to throw your thoughts out there, you can do so using @VisitScottParl on X, and on Instagram, we are @ScottParl. So I would also add that this event is being recorded and will be available on the Scottish Parliament's YouTube channel in a few weeks. So today, I am really pleased to be joined by Professor Alexandra Johnston, Gary McLean, and online we have Dr. Stuart Gillespie. And Stuart and I had a wee chat on Tuesday, I think, and we've had some pre-discussion ahead of today as well. Professor Alexandra Johnston is the theme lead for obesity, nutrition and disease. She is a UK registered nutritionist. She is actively engaged in obesity research and translating the team's innovative science to a range of stakeholders. She leads the 1.6 million FIO food research grant on food insecurity and obesity, with emphasis on the retail food sector. And on my left, Gary McLean is Scotland's national chef, an award-winning author, educator and master chef, the professionals winner, passionate and about promoting Scottish food, health and education. And he represents Scotland on the global stage, inspiring future generations through his work in culinary education, international events and sustainable food initiatives. And Dr. Stuart Gillespie is online with us today. Dr. Stuart has been fighting to transform our dysfunctional food system for 40 years. Stuart worked at a range of UN agencies across the world before joining the International Food Policy Research Institute in 1999. He is the author of Food Fight: From Plunder and Profit to People on Planet. So I would ask the audience, can you welcome our panellists here today? So just as a wee opener, I'm going to ask each of our panellists, and I'm going to come to you, Dr. Gillespie, first, to do a wee opener of what your thoughts are around some of the issues that are coming up regarding junk food, the medications that are being used to tackle obesity, what causes obesity in Scotland and wider, and what do you think, we could be doing about it? What I'll ask the audience to do, we will come and do questions, but we'll have each of the panellists do a wee opener first, and that will hopefully drive some questions and thoughts and any issues, and we will be able to come to questions then. Okay, so Stuart, I'm going to come to you first.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here, even though I'm not there, I'm here, but very, very good to have the opportunity. I think I'd like to start with like a 3-minute history not lesson, but perspective, really, because if we're looking at the trajectory of obesity, I think we need to go back even as far back as 80 years, possibly even further. But if we go back 80 years, Second World War just ended. There were decisions made, policy decisions, deliberate, to mass produce cheap calories. And this was aided and abetted by very significant agricultural subsidies, which Theodore Roosevelt actually started after the Great Depression in the US, It was propelled by new technologies through green revolution, mechanization, fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and later, in the last 50 years, when Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan came in and the birth of neoliberalism, it was deliberately incentivized through deregulation of markets so that companies had free rein to continue to mass produce and overproduce. And that was where the problems started to develop. As a handful of staple crops were overproduced. Some were used through strategic use of food aids to buffer the West from the spread of communism. But there was, over time, the whole food system moved away from being viewed as a mechanism to supply a basic need, to fulfill a human right, towards generating and overproducing commodities. So the whole system became financialized. And especially in the last 25 years of this century, we've had a situation of widespread corporate capture of our food system on the part of a handful of transnational corporations, different ones operating at different points in the system. If we're looking at the downstream retail end, we see Nestle, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Unilever, General Mills, actually having something like 75% of actual market share. They produce ultra-processed products. Most of their portfolio is directed towards the production of ultra-processed foods and drinks, which are, for them, the most profitable, for us, the least healthy. Not only for us, for the planet too, and we can come into that. So that's the crux of the challenge we have. If you look at the trajectory of obesity, starting in the US, it maps to the widespread increase and rocketing growth of ultra-processed food industry. So that's the essence and that's the challenge. Now that market and financial power, we can come to that later, can be translated into political power through lobbying and through a whole range of what I call the dark arts of policy interference. But for me, that's the essence. I don't think we have a broken food system because the system was designed in a different century for a different purpose. What we need to do is actually transform the system into one that is right for people and planet.
Thank you, Dr. Gillespie, for setting that out. Transforming the food system. Okay, shall I come to you, Alex, next, and then to Gary? What's your perspective about all of this?
So I was listening to Stuart there, and I can reflect that the Rowett Institute was set up 100 years ago to tackle the shortage of food, and Lord Boydor would be aghast if he was here today listening to me speaking about food poverty and food insecurity, and that the problems we face now are linked to malnutrition, whether it's because 2/3 of the Scottish population are living with overweight and obesity, and we need new strategies, which we're going to discuss this afternoon, about the use of pharmaceuticals to achieve a healthy weight, or the use of food. And I guess one main point that I want to get across is that we shouldn't blame or stigmatise those that are living with overweight and obesity, and that we do need to place emphasis on changing our food environment, and that will involve local government, it will involve our national government here and where we are just now in Scotland, but also England as well. So we're overriding, because health, of course, is devolved. So it is not easy, and I don't think we'll discuss all solutions today, but I think, thank you to all the audience for turning up, and looking forward to hear your views. It's, that relationship between giving treatment to solve the overweight problem, or whether we can actually manage it through changing our food system. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I think we will come on to issues around how do we tackle it when it comes to weight loss drugs and balancing all the complexities of how we help address obesity in Scotland. Gary, what are your thoughts, your opening thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, it was lovely to hear Stuart, because I talk about World War II a lot when it comes to our food system changing, but I look at it in a slightly different point of view, where the whole home structure changed. So the typical way that we were taught to cook, and typically it was mother to daughter, which again needed to change. and we thought we'd fixed it, but obviously we've not. And I think in Scotland, I think in Britain, even in the Western world, we have so little disregard for food. We have, you know, it's almost like a necessary evil. And the people that are interested, it's a hobby. It's a middle-class hobby. I get annoyed when I listen to the radio in the morning. There's the new stats about salt, sugar and diet and everything else. And I just think about the people that are getting bombarded every morning with this information and sometimes misinformation. People just don't know where to go. And I think we really need to get back to the basics of teaching our children to cook and understanding that this is generational change. Our children need to be able to cook. And that's the bottom line. And if we spent 1% of the money we spend in tackling lifestyle disease, 16.5 billion a year we spend on obesity and diabetes. So it's a massive amount of money. It's about £500 for every taxpayer in Britain. We're fighting against this, and I think we have to put in measures that fix it long term. You know, and there's other things that can be done, but I think it's really simple. We need to invest in education and teaching our kids to cook.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. So I've got a couple of wee opener questions, and then we'll come to the audience as well. And if I look at my notes, that what we're going to do is, if you have a question, I would like you to just put your hand up and keep your hand up until the roving mic comes to you, and then you can say who you are, who you represent. You might be part of an organisation, and then you may wish to direct your question to all of the panellists or specifically to one of the panellists. And if there's loads of questions, I might take 2 or 3 at a time, and that means that people get their questions out there, because quite often the answers and responses can roll in. Not all panellists need to respond to all questions, but absolutely, if you want to chip in, we have got some interesting questions that some of our panellists may be absolutely expert in when it comes to weight loss medications and even lab-grown food. So that's something that we will come to. So my first question is, let's get right into the junk versus jab, which is the title today, and how we tackle obesity in Scotland. You know, over the recent years, there has been a growing trend in using weight loss drugs, and primarily some of the drugs were for addressing type 2 diabetes to help support weight loss. And what do you think, and maybe I'll come to Alex first about this, what do you think the role should be in the drugs in improving public health and tackling obesity going forward, given recent announcements of price increases for some of these medications?
So the catchy title sort of alluding to junk or jabs, as junk food versus jabs or injections or injectable drugs that can be used for those living with diabetes and those living with overweight and obesity. So a couple of the brand names that you hear about in the press would be Ozempic, which is an injectable which actually was designed for those living with type 2 diabetes to help manage their comorbidities and risk for disease, but then has been taken on board and licensed for treatment of overweight, and that would be like Wegovy, another brand name. So these drugs are incredibly powerful at targeting the gut hormones to make you feel or have less appetite. They only work for as long as you're taking the drug. So we have seen a change in our food system because people who are taking these injectables have a smaller appetite, but that also means that they are at risk of malnutrition and need essential nutrients in the small portions that they're taking, but also need to be aware of the amount of protein that they're consuming, because you don't want to lose the healthy muscle mass that you have as a part of weight loss. So we do need a toolbox of different drugs that can be used to help people achieve a healthy weight. But at the same time, we need a public health strategy that helps prevent weight gain in the first place. So we need a two-pronged approach in order to move forward to achieve a healthy weight for those living in Scotland.
Okay, thanks. Gary, do you have any thoughts about the drugs as well, and then I'll come to Dr Gillespie as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is another step in the change of diet. And my big concern is that people now think that they can do what they like and there's a magic wand that fixes it at the end. I don't know, that was my first impressions when these type of drugs came out. But also the long-term effects, you know, are people then hooked? As you say, they only work. So I think if anyone is getting those drugs, it has to be part and parcel of an education programme so they do understand what they should and shouldn't be eating.
So maybe I can jump in, but that isn't always the case. So you can get these drugs prescribed from your GP or your local health authority, but not all local health authorities are in the position to offer this as a weight loss therapy, like NHS Grampian doesn't, where I'm based in Aberdeen. So it means that citizens are going online and ordering the drugs and praying for a private prescription, which may or may not be scrutinised in terms of eligibility and that educational support. So I think that's a valid point that you've made, Gary.
So we don't have total control then?
No. Okay, and sure, I know, is this, in addition to the medications, is this just moving the profit from big food companies to big pharma?
Yeah, well, just to say, yeah, you're right. I agree entirely with Alex and Gary. We need both. We've always done that with any health condition. We treat and we prevent. It's the same if we ban smoking indoors, but we irradiate lung tumours if people have lung cancer. It's the same through time. If you look at it, so if the title of this session, Junk versus Jabs, if I was in big business, I would think, oh, do I make my profit with junk food or do I make my profit with big pharma through injectables? And we see this time and time again. Profit will seek where profit can be made through unregulated hypercapitalism. And this is not unusual. The big issues, I think, so both are needed. We need to clean up our widespread obesogenic junk food saturated food environments, raise the floor of a population's nutritional status and health status. But we need to obviously treat and help with therapies, including injectables, those who need it. And I've seen, direct, close-handed, incredible transformation that's possible, both physically and mentally. But there are big issues, and I'm sure we'll get to them, big issues around equity, sustainability, access. And I'm not talking just about individuals in Scotland or England or the UK, but I'm looking globally as well. Because I work globally, there are massive issues around that. I'm also worried, actually, with regard to ultra-processed food and junk industries wading into sub-Saharan Africa now, because that's where they're going to be targeting profit-making, because potentially the demand will be dropping in Western countries. So, but yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that our public health policy is being driven by forces that are targeting profit, not people. And I think that is the essence of the challenge we have. But within that, we need to treat and we need to prevent.
Okay, thank you. So before we come to the audience, I'm just going to ask Gary a question about the work that you've done, which has been a lot, is looking at the healthy relationship with cooking and eating food in terms of in education. And so we'll go there, and then I'll come to the audience for questions. So then I'll be looking for hands up, because we've raised lots of issues around stigma, obesogenic environment, poverty, tackling poverty. And then I think in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of what Stuart's saying about conflict of interest in terms of who's driving the food system or the food policy. So that's something as well. Gary, what do we need to do before we come to solutions? Yeah. What do we need to do to help support education in relationship with healthy food?
I spend a lot of time in education, a lot of time in nursery schools, primary schools, high schools, even prisons, where food is used to sometimes change life. Sometimes you're working with some of the bad kids of the school who are, that have been expelled 12 times and stuff like that. And food's an amazing tool to sort of bring people together. It's one of the things, regardless of your background, your religion, anything, that brings people together. But what I find is really interesting, regardless of whether I'm in a nursery school or a prison with life for prisoners, I don't like that. There's a big thing about not liking food and not having a good relationship, but not once in 400 visits. Has a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old prisoner not eaten what they've made? Never, not once. They've always eaten what they've made, because you're demystifying it, and they've put that energy and effort, and you're giving them the knowledge and the skills. And it's amazing some of the turnaround, even in 1 visit or 2 visits to a particular place, when people actually get hands-on with food, and sometimes it's for the first time. Sometimes you get grown adults who've never, ever cooked fresh food. And I think that's shocking.
Okay, thank you. Righty. Now we can come back to other questions that I have in front of me, but I'm keen to come to the audience. Any thoughts or questions? There's a couple of hands up here. We'll go first here and then to front and centre.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Stephen. We have a long-standing interest in nutrition. We've participated in some food studies at the Rowett Institute, so we're well aware of the Rowett. I want to pick up on a couple of things that you both said, Gary and Alex. Gary, I think you used the phrase middle-class hobby for food. And Alex, you said that we shouldn't stigmatise obese and illness-related, or people that are affected by illness. And I guess my question builds on both of those. We've been to quite a lot of events, including at the Rowett, where you get a certain demographic attending, and it tends to be the same demographic. You're not getting a cross-representation of the whole of society. So how do you encourage the whole of society to get involved in this? And how do you encourage people to take personal responsibility? It can't just be about government and society. Surely there's got to be personal responsibility here as well.
Okay, thanks. So before we come to let's respond to that.
I can maybe start. So today's a really important day, not because I'm in Edinburgh with you, but also because I'm sharing some of the work that I've been working on for the last 3 years, which is around regulation, evaluation of regulation around product placement in the retail food space, which is legislation based in England. It's yet to come out in Scotland. There's a consultation underway, and we expect those guidelines to be launched next year. So what we've reported today through the press, and I think it's really important that, yes, I understand that you feel that individuals should take responsibility, but I also feel that actually we should take a lot of that responsibility away from individual choice and make sure we've got a food environment that encourages healthier and environmentally sustainable food choices, that makes it an awful lot easier than it is currently. And this evaluation that was just done shows that regulation around product placement in the retail food space does lead to a reduction in high fat, sugar and salt products being purchased in the retail space. And the most important thing of all, for me personally, is that it didn't further widen equality. So it seemed to have an effect right across different socio-demographic groups. So I agree with your opening statement that we should be trying to embrace all across society, and actually I'm trying to do that with the grant that I have, which is looking at food insecurity and living with obesity. So that, I mean, I welcome your question, because some of the work that's very topical even today that we're doing is exactly trying to address that. So I agree it's difficult to do, but keep going. Yes, thanks.
Gary?
There's a lot of great charities and individuals who are out there teaching people to cook, and it is that poorer demographic. I've seen some great events where you've got families cooking, you've got kids during the summer cooking with their parents, and some of those events that I've done, whatever it is they've been cooking, they've actually had that for their lunch, and then they go home with the exact same ingredients. So it trying encourages them doing that in their own environment. But again, what I've found, there's no joined up. There's some great people out there that are doing amazing things, but nothing's joined up. It's all these little community hubs and volunteers and things like that. And I just think we could do better. I just think as a country we could do better and have a joined up approach. As I said earlier, I don't think we treat food with the respect. People spend more time buying a pair of shoes than they will do their weekly shop. You know, we're creatures of habit, You know, we go to the same shop, park in the same place, take our trolley from the same bit, and we go around the supermarket, picking up the exact same stuff we did the last time we were there. We go home, we take a chicken out the bottom of the fridge, put it in the bin and replace it with the chicken that we're going to put in the bin the following week. You know, and we just don't put enough time. And again, we're in a world where there's so much resources, you know, things like online. You know, people can access absolutely anything they want. You know, even ChatGPT will do your shopping list and all that sort of stuff. So there's no excuse, but it's just getting people to engage and understand the importance. And again, another thing I hate is when they talk about healthy eating is expensive. I totally disagree. You know, if someone's buying a frozen lasagna that won't give them the nutrition they need for that evening, never mind that day, versus buying vegetables and pulses and tinned tomatoes and things like that. But again, it's getting back to that knowledge and trying to change that food culture. I work all over the world and I see completely different attitudes towards food. And we've turned into America and no one cares over there either. And in fact, they're worse than us. But when you go to Asia, even a modern country like Singapore, they value food, they value cookery, they value family round the table. India, I mean, I've got friends in India, husband and wife, and they've got 2 recipes for everything they make. One's the mother-in-law's and one's the mother's. And depending who's coming for dinner is what recipe they'll use. You know, and that's the arguments that they have. And it's lovely to see, but we've lost it, and we just have to try and reconnect, because I'm an advocate of obviously Scottish produce, and we are without a doubt got the best food in the world, but arguably the worst diet, and there's something definitely amiss there. I go abroad and have to use other people's stuff, and it's, you know, I did a dinner in Philadelphia last year. I bought these 6-7 lobsters. I used the bones to make the sauce, and I tasted the sauce, and there was nothing in it. There was no flavour, there was nothing. And I'm just thinking about the flavour you would get from Scottish seafood, that you put no effort into it, it's naturally there. So and I bang on about it a lot, but I firmly believe we have got the best produce in the world. And it's people, environment, it's weather, it's all the other things that we've got in this part of the world. But no one can cook it and no one buys it. You know.
Let me come to Stuart around that, because about personal responsibility versus what governments can do, because I think the word nanny state comes into my mind when we talk about that. And Stuart, you've got global experience as well in what Gary's describing as in different cultures and how they approach food as well.
I mean, individual responsibility can only go so far, you know, in terms of the capacity to actually respond to anything. And so freedom of choice is actually a myth for many people. It's no coincidence. So if you look at the trajectory of obesity just rocketing around the world, there hasn't been a mass change in genetics. There hasn't been a mass change in willpower. But what has changed is the food environment and the way the governments back off from regulation, partly because they're being lobbied to do that, partly, and all sorts of reasons. The nanny state is a nonsense concept. It's nonsense because there are multiple examples. We don't let kids buy cigarettes. We don't let kids buy alcohol. We don't have asbestos in walls. There are more. We have lockdowns during pandemics. That's when the government steps in to say this is a mass-scale public health challenge. It's our duty as government to protect people. They do that. On top of that, you have individual responsibility. You need both, again. I think when we look at poverty, we need to think of not only the fact that it's access, physical access to, if you're living in a junk food swamp where you literally can't afford transport out to find healthy food, that's one big problem. Income, obviously, time to cook, to prepare. There are issues whether you even have a cooker. So that, and again, I'm looking a lot in a global sense. So that we need, we have individual agency, but we have an absolute right to expect that our governments protect the right to food and to health, to the capacity and that's partly why we elect them. So I think we have to shoot down this. It's an industry fabricated term, nanny state. It was propagated deliberately, and it's nonsense.
Okay, thanks. Let's come to the second question here, front and centre in the green.
Hi, my name's Robin Ireland. I'm the interim head of Obesity Action Scotland. I'm an honorary research fellow at the University of Glasgow School of Health and Wellbeing. Thanks very much for staging this. It's really interesting. I think I've sort of tweaked my question from the last one to link it up, because I think I've just read what you wrote about Nanny State in your book, Stuart, literally on the train coming over. I could hear you writing almost at the same time. And I probably agree with a lot of what you said. What I wanted to ask is, when we talk about individual responsibility, we surely aren't talking about children. And our children are marketed at constantly. The environment that I grew up in, and frankly all of us did on the panel as well, was not like it is now. We have junk food ads everywhere. How do you think we can protect our kids, please? Can we not be surprised when they respond to the marketing nudges they get and they want to buy junk food? They want to buy energy drinks. They want to buy sugary drinks. How do we protect them better? Because we're clearly not doing a very good job at the moment.
Great question. So thank you for that. And I could come to Gary first. And as well as junk food, there's also melon and watermelon and cotton candy vapes that are being absolutely driven to kids. But that is a conversation for another day. But thanks for that question, Robin. Gary, do you want to pick up there?
Again, I think a lot of the time, I mean, taking the marketing side out of it, I mean, I think from a government point of view, that is fairly easy to control, I would think. But in saying that, kids are on iPads and phones and things like that, so it is a constant bombardment. But the thing that always puzzles me is lunchtimes around schools, when you've got chip shops that only open at lunchtime. You know, that it's a step away from a high school with 2,000 kids, and it's queued out the door. And then the school meals are lying empty. And I think school meals is also, I think there's an issue with school meals, because I think sometimes the legislation can change what the kids are getting. So it's no something that they want to eat. You know, we're talking 30 grams of ham or meat a week and things like that. There's no salt in school kitchens, so then food becomes bland. So it's got to be, we're selling soggy Kit Kats to our kids at lunchtime, and we wonder why they're queuing out at Greggs and chip shops, because the offer that they're getting. And then there's a whole food waste thing. You know, and when I go into school meals, all I see is gallons and gallons and gallons of wasted food. So anybody that knows anything about food waste knows it's a massive carbon problem, because it's grown, it's travelled sometimes other parts of the world. It's then cooked and then it goes in the bin, and that's happening a lot in schools. Very few schools I go to where I see people queuing up the same way they do at Greggs or chip shops. So there's a bit of I think there's a bit of a step back there. And again, there'll be some schools that, again, salt's not allowed, and they just deal with it and that's it. There's other schools where there's a real passionate person behind the scenes that will make sure the food's tasty by using other means. And sometimes the other means is things like stock cubes, which are, again, they provide that salt balance that they can't use in salt, so therefore it costs more money. And so I just think the whole thing's just a bit of a jumble. And things like where chip shops are or where Greggs are, or all these things, I think, again, could be a planning thing.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe
Alex?
I can add to that, so I agree with you that it is really important to protect children from advertising products that are not going to be beneficial to health in the long term. So I think that the Good Food Nation plan is going to try and address some of these issues that can be, what Gary said, implemented at a local level to restrict advertising and placement of out-of-home outlets are near educational establishments. So that will be great to see that going forward. But I also accept that when you consider how much time young people spend on their phones, that it's very difficult, because you can't legislate for what they see on social media and all the pop-up adverts. So that's quite challenging. I suppose one thing I would mention that would be relevant is that the soft drinks levy has had a positive impact, we know, and particularly female teenagers, as that's what the evidence tells us, that there has been a reduction in sugar intake. So that is an example where public health strategy has worked to improve health. So yeah, good point, thank you.
Well, I'll come to you, Stuart, about how do we protect kids? What are the ways that we can do that?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And I think, when we talk about responsibility, we have an intergenerational responsibility. I got into nutrition over 40 years ago. I worked in India in a very remote area, and I saw children dying because of the way the infant formula was being marketed without any restrictions, and disinformation, misinformation, women, mothers not being able to prepare it or using contaminated water, kids dying of acute diarrhea. That was my start point of actually getting into this field. So children, I was looking at child hunger, I was looking at undernutrition. Now we have the whole spectrum of nutrition challenges across the world of different types and different places. So we should never lose sight of that. I worked a lot in the World Health Organization in Geneva. The World Health Organization's budget is 1/7 of Nestlé's marketing budget, one company's marketing budget. And most of that, a large portion of that, is targeted at children, and it relates to junk foods, which is the largest share of their portfolio. This is what we're dealing with, but we obviously have to protect those who need protecting, and kids, especially the youngest kids, are among that group.
Thanks. Now I'm looking for any other hands. At the back, there's a gentleman with a grey cardigan on, and then at the very back, we could do both at the same time if you want, actually. Yeah, go.
Hi, thanks. I'm from BEATS, which is a charity that works with eating disorders. So I'm interested in the point about personal responsibility, because I think what we've sometimes seen is when messaging about obesity is that obesity is a lifestyle choice, a personal failing, and that the individual has to deal with that by restricting their eating. That's dangerous to people who are at risk of eating disorders. And we know there's a very complex relationship between obesity and eating disorders. And just as obesity has increased greatly in recent years, so have eating disorders in the years since the pandemic. So how can we have a joining up in our messages so that we're not pulling people in two different directions on these two different topics?
Okay, thanks. Now hold your thoughts, Stuart, Alex and Gary, and we'll take the second question at the back. Thanks.
I'm going to be a horrible pain and have two questions, sorry. The first one's just about public diners and your opinion on public diners, because I was quite excited at the prospect of these state-supported restaurants, but I'm wondering if you might say that they're a bit of a cheat because you were sort of encouraging education and cooking, and the public diners are sort of saying, if you can't look after yourself or can't afford to look after yourself, come and use these products. My other one is I'm possibly an arch enemy of yours because I do not enjoy food, possibly a neurodiverse thing, and I'd be looking for the day when I could get all the nutrition I need in a tablet. Is that coming any time soon?
Very thought-provoking, interesting questions. We did have a wee chat about public diners earlier, and I suppose your question in terms of neurodiverse, I suppose it does link into eating disorders as well. So, okay, who wants to go first on any thoughts for those three questions? Public diners is maybe one we can go with. Yeah,
I can start. So actually we hosted a public diners event at the Rowett last month, and it was incredibly successful. And for those that don't know what that is, it's a low-cost eating opportunity, and it's not a new concept. It's something that was established decades ago to provide low-cost meals for anybody really, and you don't need to be facing food poverty to access that type of food. In fact, I can reflect that I've seen some interesting data recently about university students facing food poverty as well, which is really worrying given that I'm working at a university. So I think public diners is a really interesting concept. I know that Nourish Scotland have been awarded a grant to run some test and evaluate the service. There's going to be one area in Dundee, and this is all part of what we call social prescribing. So it's giving people access to services to allow them to become educated, to gain access. We've touched on that, lack of access, to make healthier food more accessible, more affordable, and that creates equity for all, which I think touches into one of the topics that they started on. So I'm actually a fan of public diners. It's available to all. And then in answer to the question about how do we embrace that dichotomy of giving public advice that both embraces healthy weight but doesn't antagonise for those that have eating disorders. I think that's an excellent question, and I don't have time to go into an in-depth solution here, but certainly when I do my research, I use what's called a whole systems approach, where we actually embrace discussions with all stakeholders. So including your organisation in those discussions. And for example, there is a consultation out right now about calorie labelling, which I know is an area of interest about how that can be portrayed to the general population. But certainly ongoing discussions and having a voice to contribute towards that different policy development is incredibly powerful. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Gary, will I come to you and then I'll come to Stuart about that, because it was very interesting to raise. We had a recent debate in Chamber about avoidance food restrictive intake disorder, which is another eating disorder that we're learning more about as well. And so there's every year we have almost an annual debate now, I think, about raising awareness, and online is a challenge for young people that are struggling with eating disorders as well. Gary, what's your thoughts on any of the questions?
Getting people together to eat fresh food has, it's a plus for everything. It's a plus for mental health. And I think when people, every little sort of step in the right direction is perfect. If people are eating fresh food and they're getting it at a great price, the more of that good food that they eat, the better they feel. And hopefully, we talk about that individual responsibility. Their body will tell them that it's better. So anything that brings people together in an affordable way for food. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we could do, to tackle, the food insecurity. And I think, to be honest, we're lucky these days that families have got access to food. No child in Scotland should ever be hungry these days, whereas 30 years ago they were. Where I grew up, there was a lot of hungry kids, and there was no food banks. There was no other option other than kids going to bed hungry. So, thinking that way. But I'd like to think it's a stepping stone to something much better.
Okay, I'll come to you as well, Stuart, because community larders, food banks, public diners, these are things that have popped up because of poverty, because of austerity imposed on people. So there's a wide range of fixes or solutions that have already kind of evolved. So yes, come at you, Stuart.
Yeah, well, just to say on with regard to obesity and eating disorders, we have to absolutely destigmatise both obesity and eating disorders. As we talked about the limits of individual responsibility, it's about protecting people, helping people, supporting people who need to have the ability to eat healthily. In terms of my partner, actually works in the food bank down the road here, and she's turned it into a food club with her colleagues. Turned it into a food club, which involves cooking, which involves sitting around a table preparing. And sometimes it doesn't work, but it's moving in the right direction. We have to regain and, as Gary said, refine and rediscover our food cultures that make the pleasure and the commensality of sitting around the table and the sociability that goes alongside that. With regard to public diners, and actually in New York right now, they're experimenting or proposing public grocers. Really interesting stuff. There's a post online by Civil Eats, which is a website. You could probably Google it and find it, which is really interesting. So all that's in the right direction. We need to refine or rediscover the kind of joys of food, of whole foods, of diverse foods, and of cooking, and of the sociability that goes around that.
Grand, thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask another wee question, and then we'll come back to the audience. Okay, I am interested in looking at how we do, I suppose, engage and culturally engaged. There's a lot of diverse food cultures out there, and we have diverse communities now. And so that would be part of how do we support that in terms of engagement, education. And I'm looking at you, Gary, as well, because there was a recent literature review that suggested that improving cooking and eating habits of pupils, so that's a diverse group of young Waynes across Scotland in our schools. So if we improve eating habits of the kids as pupils in schools, does that lead to better nutrition for the future?
100%. I mean, you don't have to be a professor to answer that question. But what I've found, again, our schools are very diverse, but the kids are the exact same. Doesn't matter, you know, what end of the city they're from or what their background is. The children are all the same. They look at you the same way. They want to learn the same way. They want to be spoken to and treated the same way. And at the end of it, whether it's something I've cooked or something they've cooked, they're all round the table enjoying that food. And at the start, I always ask at the start, who's going to taste, who's going to eat, and you'll get 2 hands up. And then at the end, they're fighting over what they've made, and they want to take some home to their parents. And so there is an argument where the children could be encouraging the parents better, you know, if they've got that education and they've got that knowledge, and they go home with that little spark about something they've learned, you know. And again, it's getting back to basics. So pre World War II, we cooked what we had, and that was it. And again, it was a generation where you didn't leave anything on your plate and things like that. I remember my mum's stories, but the fundamental foods or basic foods are simple because we cooked to live back then. We had to cook, so things were a lot simpler. 4 and 5 ingredients in a recipe or in a meal. And that's the same all over the world. Wherever you go, whatever the food style is, those, you know, classic dishes are always really simple. And again, it's getting back to that, I think, you know, and it's getting people to understand what happens to food when you put heat on it. You know.
Okay, well, I'll come to Stuart first online. That way I'm not leaving you till last, and then come back to Alex about, I suppose, food diversity, access, things that we need to do to support education, and then, you know, better food habits.
Yeah, I mean, we've had. Can I talk about governments?
Yeah.
There are 4 things. Because again, this is part of the enabling environment for all those wonderful things we've been talking about. And this is about government saying they have a role because we elect them. You know, 4 things: institutions, incentives, information, and interest. So the first one is institutions. The government have the power, they're not using it always, but they have the power to procure healthy diets, healthy foods for hospitals, for clinics, for government agencies, for schools, school feeding. That's institutions. Second, incentives. There, it's about using appropriate balance of tax and subsidy, so down-regulating the unhealthy stuff, reducing ridiculous subsidies on overproduction of staples, improving taxing not only of sugary drinks, but also potentially junk food, but importantly, using the dividend from that tax to support, through vouchers, through food stamps, however, earmarking it to support low-income families to improve their access to healthy diets. That's the incentive, changing the incentive side of it. Third, information. That's labeling, proper labeling of, you know, there's some fantastic examples in Latin America of black octagon labeling of high fat, salt, sugar, high energy density, taken off cartoon characters where there are too many of these octagons. Information in terms of dietary guideline committees. And then the fourth is interests, getting rid of conflicts of interest from government advisory bodies, getting proper disclosure of lobbying practices, issues around revolving door between industry and government, dealing with all that, shining a light on our big success stories in the way that is done in Ireland and in Canada. UK is terrible. I did a study with the Food Foundation here, and we did a deep dive into corporate lobbying, and it's really kind of pathetic, you know, in terms of disclosure, whereby Big Food and their various front groups just say we meet ministers to discuss business. That's all they ever report. And so it's not being followed. The protocols are not being followed. So that's how government, just through those simple 4 sets of action, conveniently started with IN, can actually start to regulate and improve the enabling environment for us as individuals, both individual agency, collective agency, to actually access and afford and cook and prepare and, the food culture that goes along with that. So I think we've got to remember it's both individuals and it's government agency.
Okay, thanks. So 4 Ins. Institutes, incentives, information and interest. So, Alex, what do you think?
I agree. Education is only one component because we all know we should be eating 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. That's part of the Eat Well guide, but less than 1% of the UK population manage to achieve all of those dietary recommendations. So we have the knowledge, but we don't enact on that. So I think it is really important that we support families. So some of the work that we presented here in Parliament last month was around supporting even younger than school age. It's mums who are feeding infants, because we know that the baby formula is one of the top 10 products that are stolen from supermarkets, and there are some practices that don't promote using that in the correct way, because mums are facing food poverty and they're using money to feed the family and maybe watering down the formula to try and make it last longer. And part of that could be that we increase maternity pay, which is minimal, up to the living wage. So that's by tackling food poverty, that will have a knock-on impact in giving and facilitating, empowering mums to be able to feed the family. That's just one example where I think we can amplify the approaches that we're taking, certainly at government level. So, yeah.
Interesting. In America, they have food stamps for certain groups of people, and there might be ways to explore tackling that food poverty and supporting women to get formula and promote breastfeeding as well, actually, which we are doing already. So that's interesting. Yeah, Gary.
I actually work on a campaign for Social Security, and there's extra cash that people can access. They just have to apply and they get a card with extra money to buy healthy food. That already exists, and the uptake is tiny. The uptake is tiny. So they spend money on marketing, giving away money that no one's picking up on. I'm actually filming 6 recipes for them next month. Like, again, back to 4 ingredients, really simple, quick, easy food. And again, they're really struggling to get people to get the message out there.
Interesting. There's a local chef that I work with that him and I did a wee video. It was feed a family of 4 for under a £5. Yeah. And it was no meat in it, though, because the meat was more expensive. And that was something that we did to try and raise awareness that you can create a healthy meal. So interesting about like the raising awareness around what is already out there available.
Again, I did a big campaign with the Daily Record, and it was feed a family for 4 for £30. And when they came to me with the idea, I said it can't be done. And I said I'm not going to do it. It's just, and my wife encouraged me to go shopping with £30. And I came back and I did. But there was certain things like those larder essentials, I think, didn't count. So there was a lot of messaging, and you have to build up that your spices or your oils and things like that, and vinegars and things like that. But once you've got those basics in place, it can be done. But it just takes a bit of that. You just have to think about it.
But there is the cost of living crisis. It's not just having the money to afford buying the food, it's having the resources available to even put, to use energy, the gas or electricity to cook. So
again, there's a lot of people who don't even have a cooker.
Yes.
So again, I've done events where there was 200 crock pots that did everything. There was a pressure cooker, I think it was a slow cooker, and everything else like that. And again, developing recipes that then go with the cooker, recipes and videos that then go with the cooker, because people can't afford to put their cooker on, or they don't have a cooker. Which again, in Scotland, you find that you know, quite incredible that people are in that position. So there's then no other option. If you can't even cook, where are you going? You know, you're buying fast food.
Has the advent of air fryers helped or hindered?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing for me that I thought was going to have us jumping, you know, a decade further forward in terms of cooking was lockdowns. You know, I got really excited when I went into supermarkets and there was no flour because everyone was making bread and there were certain things that you really struggled to get. And I got excited that people were now trying to recreate their favourite foods at home. And I thought once they've got those skills, and again, we all thought we were 3 weeks or 4 weeks in when you get, you know, into year 2, I was kind of hoping that that would continue, but I don't know if there's any studies done on that, but I don't think it has. I think we're back to where we were.
I confess I was one of those people making banana bread, but the data I've seen, the retail data, is that across Scotland, is that no, the habits did not improve during lockdown. In fact, the choices that were made were more around less about cooking from scratch and more about buying ready meals. So actually, I think, and we saw an increase in eating out of home because there was more deliveries, wasn't there? So Deliveroo type apps where you can, you know, order for food to be delivered to your house, and that has continued after COVID. And so we were talking about junk food here, so I think it's important to remember about what is eaten out of the home. It actually has increased across Scotland, and that has not helped in terms of addressing healthy weight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm looking for other hands before I come to a couple of questions about lab-grown food and then climate impact of the current food system. So, if I come to, we've got a lady over here and then Shobha in the front, okay? And if I have time, I'll come back, right? I think we'll have time. We've got plenty of time.
Hi, my name is Fiona. I previously worked as a clinical dietitian in Greater Glasgow and Clyde and currently working in Caledonian University. I was quite shocked when you said you thought there was no hungry children in Scotland. We have admissions with hungry children, we have admissions with hungry adults, and it's only increasing. I believe there was some work done recently to show that it's the highest increasing reason for admission to hospital is hunger. Not uncommon at all. And I really think we're getting down to inequalities here, because you spoke a lot about food waste. And I think if you are worried about money and you don't have this cooking equipment, you're going to buy the food your children will eat. Yeah. It's not, you can't afford the healthy food in that scenario. You can't afford to be throwing things out. I really think we need to look at, and even when I worked clinically, trying to refer people to food banks is extremely difficult. They might be open twice a week. A bus journey ride away. Actually, we had far more people fed. I love this public diners idea. We had far more people fed in the Sikh temple than we ever had people who actually managed to get food from the food banks. I really think this is an inequalities issue, and that's where we need to be looking.
What I meant by no child in Scotland should go to bed hungry is because there is access to free food these days, and yeah, there might be issues to get there, but there is free food, and 30 years ago there wasn't, and there was no other option other than kids going to bed hungry. So there is access, you know, whether it's through a food bank or a charity or, you know, wherever it might be, but there is options for parents to find food from somewhere, whereas 30 years ago there was no option. Food wasn't free. There was no charities giving food away.
And the poverty and inequality is something that we've already talked about, and you're absolutely right. I am a co-convener of the Health Inequality Cross-Party Group in this Parliament, and often you know, we talk about how do we help improve health inequalities, and tackling poverty is something that Alex has alluded to already.
So I can reflect on what you've said has also been shared to me in our public advocates and people, families facing food insecurity, and they have also reflected what you said in terms of access to either crisis food relief, and we shouldn't really be relying on food banks as a solution. We should be empowering people to make choices that are culturally acceptable for their food choices and their needs. So, yeah, I thank you for making that statement, and I fully, agree with you. Yeah.
Okay. We'll come a question here. Shoba's got the microphone already.
I'm Shobha John. I work in the global food governance space. We heard about public health policies being driven by profits on one hand. At the same time, we also hear about businesses making the case that they're legitimate stakeholders to be consulted in the food conversations. Can we hear from the speakers, particularly I'm looking at Stuart here, about how have other countries managed the tensions between these different stakeholder groups when it comes to public health policy making?
That is a great question, because we kind of mentioned conflict of interest and who's lobbying and who's then directing policy and things like that. So Stuart, we'll come to you first on that one.
Okay, yeah, really, really important question. There is a massive issue and a challenge with regard to conflict of interest, individuals, groups. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the problem we have is there are two different purposes. We have industry, food industry, a large part of which, the biggest part of which, is driving towards maximizing profit through the least healthy foods, ultra-processed junk foods. That's a fact. Now, they shouldn't be near the policy table, because they can contribute in terms of implementation of policy decisions, but they shouldn't be at the policy table. We need public participation around policy with academics, experts, with civil society, with individuals, with citizens. And if we don't have that kind of separation, we get pollution, we get a watered down policy, we get I have a whole chapter called the dark arts, and we have derailing of policy, we have doubt being, and disputes and denial, and this happens across the board, and we've seen it time and time again. So I think we have to have clear differentiation with regard to certain. I'm not against private sector; that'd be ridiculous, but it's about certain companies, transnational corporations who are privileging profit at all costs. But I should also just mention that it's not just those corporations. If you look upstream, you look at the hedge funds, you look at the investment management firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, they're the ones driving this profit at all costs mentality. Some of the companies are trying within those confines to do the right thing and to balance their portfolios with regard to healthier options. But we have this thing called shareholder primacy. So I think conflict of interest is a big deal. And I think one of the challenges, a lot of food conferences, international food conferences like the UN Food System Summit, believe in this notion of opening all the doors. If you open all the doors, we end up with this dilution of policy. We end up in this confusion between profit and people. And I think we need to be careful of that. And we need to take seriously the issues of conflict of interest. Two groups have done this. UNICEF have got very clear policy on UPF industry. There's a Nutrition International group in Canada have clear policy about the UPF industry with regard to how they engage. We need to have some clarity and transparency around these type of things.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Shall we come to you? And then who else has got questions? We've got about 12 minutes before I need to start going to closing remarks.
So it's picking up on something that Stuart said, actually. It's kind of the whole panel. Government clearly has an interest to make sure that its citizens are as healthy as possible, but they also have a national interest to protect their own industries and their own big companies. How do we encourage governments to start thinking more globally and acting in global interests rather than national interests?
Okay. Stuart, shall we come to you first on that? How do we get companies to think more in the global interest and
Governments particularly to think in global interests?
the governments to think in global interests instead of even personal profit?
I think we actually, within the things like the United Nations, multilateral engagement on global challenges, including climate, including malnutrition, overweight and obesity, which are becoming, global challenges. They have a role and responsibility, individual national governments, because these crises go way beyond geographical boundaries. And so I think we need to, remind ourselves that governments need to play their part in this. And I think we actually need to move back towards food and health being seen as basic human rights, the United Nations remembering what it was founded on, the principles it was founded on. You know, today they've just declared a famine in Gaza. That took a long time. You know, a lot of people are sort of in despair around the delays around that. But that's an extreme case of, in this case, hunger being used as a weapon in broad daylight for many months now. And the United Nations, there should be a peacekeeping force in there. You know, so that's so we have an international role. Governments certainly should be playing their part and doing a lot more when we get these kind of crises.
That's right. Yes, Alex.
I think governments do have a responsibility in many ways. We could link that just to the Sustainable Development Goals, because they tackle poverty, they tackle something we haven't really touched on yet, but environmental sustainability. And we've got local government and national government goals, for example, net zero commitment. So we can see governments coming together and enacting policies that do support international goals. But then I can reflect that then we come to individuals who go into the supermarket space, and if you ask them, what are the things that will influence you most about the choices that you're going to make for your shopping basket today, it's price and promotions that are going to be the main drivers of food choice. Half of those surveyed from the research I've seen are maybe interested in healthy options, and maybe only a fifth are interested in, let's say, eco-friendly or environmental impact of the food choices that they're making. So coming back to some of the original discussion, I do feel that we have an individual responsibility in the choices that we've made, but we also need these international commitments to provide incentives and subsidies and penalties, different public health strategies in order to embrace those goals.
Gary?
I think there's one thing, getting people to agree around a table, you know, from different countries to agree on a single mission. But I don't see any of it hitting the actual people. Scotland is light years ahead when it comes to things like recycling, for instance, or green energy. When I go to other countries, without exception, there's zero recycling at all. When you say to someone, you know, what bin does that go in? They go, well, we've only got one, whatever that is. And I'm in colleges, I'm in restaurants, I'm in people's homes. So it's getting that, as I say, we're light years. And I think Scotland, I think we're lucky in a way. I think once we get something in our mind, I think we're quite a small, passionate nation. I think we're pretty good at getting things done. You know, there's a lot of things like the smoking ban that came in, you know, which has had a massive effect on, you know, I was in Jordan a couple of weeks ago. It's the highest rate of smokers. They're smoking indoors still. You know, there was nowhere you could go that there wasn't someone smoking. And it just took me back to, you know, 2002, you know, working in the hospitality industry where everyone smoked. So we've done massive things, and I just think, you know, on a positive note, I think once we get our heads round a decision, I think we follow it through and get it done.
Yeah, that's good. Now, I had a lady back here, long black hair, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bahari, also from Glasgow Caledonian University. I'm going back a few steps, thinking about, Gary, what you said, free food being available, but also thinking about the average cost of a bus ticket in Glasgow. That's going to be unaffordable to a lot of families with food poverty. And then thinking about all of the food wastage in schools, what are the real barriers about having food fridges in schools that is more accessible to community? And why has that not been rolled out more in schools across different cities?
Yeah, I think, as I say, the work I see when I'm out, there is some amazing individuals out there who are passionate and have got systems at work that are totally engaged with the community. And again, it's a frustration for me that these people aren't at the table. These are the people that are, you know, have worked probably decades in getting their systems to work and getting people to engage. And it's all about it's people having respect. You know, when they come into these environments, it's people getting treated with respect so that they feel comfortable about going to a food bank or going to a cookery lesson that then feeds all the kids and things like that. And that's already happening. And again, I think it's getting these geniuses in my mind round the table, and how can that be passed out. But there's a lot of different things that we have to do. There's things that we have to fix here and now and on that particular day when, kids need fed. But I think we have to look at that long term, and I genuinely think it's a 30-year plan that we need to change our attitude towards food in Scotland.
Thank you. Okay. We have a question over here. Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to keep coming to the audience, and then the last time I did this, we almost ran out of time. But I'm happy to come to the audience if there's any other questions, and then I might ask a final question about lab-grown food and how that relates to the environment.
Stuart mentioned the problem of conflict of interest, and this is really a question for Professor Johnson. How do you and your colleagues in the Rowett and Aberdeen Uni handle food companies and drug companies funding research to try and prove their point? How do you make sure that that research today is independent?
So for me as an individual, I have to declare to the senior management team, which is then shared across wider the university, my conflict of interest. Now that might be personal. In my case, I don't have any. Like I don't know if you're a shareholder in a company or that kind of thing. So most of my conflict of interests are professional, so that companies might come to me and ask for a consultancy to do, for advice, for training, to run a nutrition study, and I'm happy to share my conflict of interest, that as a nutrition scientist who has a great deal of expertise and experience, then I am working with food companies. But yes, that's freely available to source. So yes, I think I fully embrace that conflict of declaring that conflict of interest. So I think I am not going to make a difference to the food that we're going to eat without working with these companies, because the area that I feel passionate about is transforming the food system. So that's my own personal view. Thanks.
And in terms of retail, we had a brief discussion earlier about product placement within supermarkets, so end of aisle, in front of the tills, as you're checking out, whether we put soft drinks in the same aisle as alcohol. They've done changes in Ireland in terms of where you can sell alcohol within the grocery store. Is that something we really need to be more proactive at driving forward?
So yeah, I mean, Scotland has a consultation underway about product placement for high fat, sugar and salt. And that's the work that I said we'd shared actually today about the evaluation about how stores in England have managed that, and that's had a very positive response. So that's a really great example where academics have such an important role to play in evaluating the impact of policy. That wouldn't be possible without the retailers sharing their transaction data. So,
okay,
yeah.
Right, thank you. Did I saw one hand here and no other? Okay, yeah, let's go here with Robin again.
Yeah, just a quick question, really. We've sort of touched on it. There's quite a global theme coming into discussion, which I'm quite enjoying, because there's a lot of learning and sharing from other cultures as well. One thing I really feel in the UK, whether it's in England or Scotland, is our fast food is generally bloody awful. Really, really poor nutritional quality. But of course, people get it because it's cheap, it's available, it's on your high street, it's accessible. I'm not going to blame anybody for that. It's out there. But you can go to some countries where street food is actually very nice. How have we gone to this situation where it's, I mean, I don't know whether people agree with me, but generally speaking, it is awful. Can we do something to improve that access, or not access in the right word? I'm no problem with people having fast food. It's there, it's cheap, it's accessible. But can we somehow improve it in some way? Because that could have quite a big impact.
As a restaurateur, there is. As a restaurateur, you're selling what people want to eat. I have a seafood thing in the Bonnywell Market in the St James Quarter, and the whole objective of that was sustainable seafood. And I started off the inspiration for the site. I don't know if anybody ever saw the documentary Seaspiracy. So it was a very one-sided, they were talking about piracy and everything else, but they brought Scotland into it, which really annoyed me. And I had the site and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And I decided there and then I'm opening a sustainable seafood a restaurant with fish and shellfish only from Scotland. Hand-dive scallops, nothing dredged, all that sort of stuff. And I had hand-dive scallops on the menu. I think I was charging £14, but they cost £4 each. Bearing in mind, a chicken supreme is £1.30, so I'm paying 3 times the price for one scallop. And they were beautiful and they were sustainable, and we had the story and we had the diver's name and all that on the menu. And for every 100 or so, they get 2 or 3 written complaints about the fact they only got one for £14. And I used to write back and give them a lesson in restaurant economics. So you pay 20% VAT, you pay for the scallop, which is 3 times the price of a chicken supreme, all that sort of stuff. And I would finish my email by saying, I thank you for your complaint. I've realised my scallop is £2 too cheap. I need to put the price up. But people have this thing about sustainability, and they stand on a pedestal. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to pay for it. And I had to take things like that off the menu because people just didn't understand the value of it. If I had got dredged scallops, I could give them 3 or 4, and that's the reality. But I couldn't put that on the menu for profit. And I didn't make anything on the scallops. It was something that I was passionate about, but eventually it had to come off. So it's all about commerciality. And there's the restaurant trade at the minute with the cost of food, the food inflation, wages, and everything else that we're paying, there is no money in restaurants. I've got 2, and I need 2 other jobs because the restaurants don't pay me anything. So there's a very, very tight market. Talking about street food in other countries, I've seen some terrible street food in India. I mean, to the point where you'd probably be hospitalised. So I've seen some amazing, it's an amazing, I love going to India, but I'm very, very careful what I eat. When you see people chopping onions on dirty streets and stuff like that, and we don't have we physically can't take that food without getting poisoned. You need to build up a tolerance, especially in the places I go. I'm not in the tourist places that might be a bit more. I'm in the outskirts. I'm where office workers are out every day having lunch. So sometimes it can be dangerous.
Okay, that's interesting. Can we'll take another question? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
wait till the microphone.
I've got quite a loud voice anyway, but I'm actually here personal interest and also as past full-time youth worker and now working in pupil support in a secondary school in support for learning. And I'm really enjoying the discussion, but I'm also aware that personally, and I'm wondering how much of our young people that I'm working with and have worked with, how confusing all this is, and how can we make it simpler? How can we, because sustainability, they hear about that in school. Cookery, not enough time spent, and they've got 2 years, and it'll be a 45-minute lesson, and the ingredients are there, but they're not getting the true reflection of what's out there because financial constraints, you don't want to be binning it. Breakfast clubs hear all that too, but how do we make it simple? Because I can go into the supermarket and it's ready, seasoned, ready, done, but I turn it over and I know how many of us we know about it. And I also know some of our young people aren't ready to take on some of these challenges because of maybe food policy gave out, during the pandemic, teachers were taking, this is Edinburgh by the way, taking bags of food, and it's in an area of Edinburgh considered to be posh. So, but boundaries cross, and how do we make it simple? How do we get? Because I'm as confused as anything, and I'm overweight. Throw in the mental health thing about food as well. There's huge. We haven't talked a lot about pharma, but there's a lot of pressure. Young people under loads of pressure. I said I was poor. My family. Well, I didn't realise I was poor until my mum said, "Did you mind being poor?" I thought, no, everybody else was. I didn't know for ages. That was. So how do we make it? How do we grasp all this? The international, because young people hear about the world. They hear about the shops. They don't realise the politics of it. They just maybe, the hot dog at lunchtime's quick. Which is another place. So loads and loads. I'm going away with my head buzzing.
Good, right. That's a great way to give our panellists an opportunity just to maybe sum up on. Okay, what is it to keep it simple? And go ahead.
I don't know. I've got 5 kids, right, and they're all from 30 to 11, and they all have different issues with food. Some good, some bad, and to navigate it is tough. But I think what kids have got now, and I think a lot of us in the room, the kids these days have got a really negative view in the world because they're bombarded with negative news and conflicting news. And one of the first things I said at the start was that driving into work and listening to that messaging, you know, about, I mean, there was one morning about 10 a day, 10 fruit and veg a day at one point a couple of years ago. I remember when that was coming out. And it gets to a point where people just go, do you know what? It's just too much. I'm just going to do what I do. You know, it seems to be too big a hill to climb for a lot of people. And again, I've got issues. My youngest son, his relationship with food is terrible. And the only time he ever eats anything is when he cooks it. So when he comes with me and we make something, and that's when he eats it. So again, I totally understand. People are stuck in families are stuck in I sometimes call it a 10-dish cycle. You know, whether they're cooking the dish or they're buying the dish or whatever it is, because no one wants to take the risk of doing something different that then means their kids or their partner or their family won't eat it. So there's that, and it's getting out of that sort of repertoire. And it might be adding 1 or 2 every 6 months that kind of changes things up, but people still have to want it. And in Scotland, people don't like getting told what to do. There was a term that was kicking about a few years ago. It's health with stealth. So, for instance, Bell's Pies and stuff like that, one of the biggest producers of food in Scotland, they've done a lot of reformulation. You know, they've taken tons and tons of salt out of their food, but they don't tell anyone because they don't want their customer thinking that they've taken something away that they like. And they don't advertise it. They don't do anything. They're just pleasantly sitting back, knowing that they've made a change that is making a difference in some way in people's lives, but they don't tell anyone, and that says everything about Scotland, I think.
Interesting. Alex, what do you think? And then I'll come to Stuart.
I think it's very complex, isn't it? And there isn't actually going to be one solution that is going to work for all people. So we are all experts in food in the room because we all eat. So I think, you know, changing the food system and changing our food environment is really important, but there's not one solution. It involves environment, it involves transport, it involves out of home, it involves schools, hospitals, health professionals, teachers, mums, dads, everybody. So I think it would be impossible to come up with one solution, but I think, you know, you've highlighted the complexity. Thank you.
That's right. And it is complex, and we talk about the work that Dr. Pekka Puska did in reformulating or changing the diets for people to reduce cardiac disease as well. Dr. Gillespie, you almost get the last word.
Interesting you just mentioned Pekka Puska, actually, because I was literally thinking, so in this book, he is the last person mentioned, what he did in Finland, because he had this notion of pressing all the buttons or pulling all the levers, whereby you can actually turn vicious cycles into virtuous cycles. And, you know, 2 + 2 = 5. You can get an additional benefit through doing things at the same time. Things are complex, of course they are. We all stand at different points in this global system. I'm also reminded of when that book was launched in April, I was talking to about 300 people in the audience in Harrogate. And the very first question I was asked was from a 9-year-old. And he just said to me, "What am I going to do tomorrow?" I'm like, "Oh, so what do you suggest I do tomorrow as a 9-year-old?" I said, "Well, you know, you're going to school, right?" He said, "Yeah, I'm going to school." So perhaps one thing, you could have a project. You could bring in food with plastic wrappers. You could look at ingredients, say, where do these ingredients come from? Where does this food come from? Which ingredients come from which countries? You know, I had to think on my feet. But so, you know, we all come at it from different angles. I think in some ways it is very complex, but in some ways it's quite simple because we have agency. We vote on food 3 times a day, you know, and it's part and parcel of our life. So we have an absolute role in, you know, in the solution, and there are different solutions, as I say, and as you said with Pekka Puska, you know, we have governments, we have civil society, we have academics, we have the industry, we have international bodies, we have the media. We haven't really talked about the media. There's a big role for the media in terms of telling interesting stories which go beyond, I don't know, cookery. Sorry, not cookery per se, but technology to about people's lives, and both in terms of the problems, but also, and importantly, the solutions. So I think we can shine a light on good practices and success stories in that way a bit more.
Brilliant, thank you. Wow, see, the time goes so fast, doesn't it? So I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank my panellists, Alexandra Johnston, Gary McLean and Dr. Stuart Gillespie for joining us online as well. We must end it there, and I think I think there's surveys for people to complete, isn't there? By scanning the QR codes, and there's paper ones as well, so that we can get feedback of how the Festival of Politics and this particular event has worked for you as well. And I think I want to just thank the audience for coming and being here. And these events are actually quite informative for me, because it's usually me that's put on the spot when we're doing questions and things like that. So I really enjoy chairing them, and this is one issue that I am really interested in as well. So I want to thank everybody for coming here today, and I think that is all I need to say. And I wish you all a really good afternoon. Thank you.